When you know how money is taken from you, you can start making money. Are you ready to start profiting from sports betting? I'm Tony from Betting Analyst. Let's crack on. So let me give you an understanding of odds. This is going to get progressively more difficult as we go along, so just bear that in mind. So there is something for everyone, hopefully. All you need to know is that if you are uninformed, right, you can only possibly lose. There's nothing else in this game. You've got to understand betting is purely about the odds. Right. The reason sportsbooks profit is quite simple, and that is the house edge. The house edge is exactly as it says here. It's a term used to describe the mathematical advantage that the gambling game and therefore the commercial gambling venue has over you as the player. So if we just use like something like a roulette game, right, you know that there's 37 balls on there, there's one for the house, you know, 1 divided by 37 is 2.7%, so you can see you've got 2.7% working against you. We could also use the same for a roll of a die, 1 in 6 chance, the true odds are 6, a sports book would offer 5, and then that's how they would make a profit because the true odds are 6, and you would be searching as a professional gambler for 7. We're going to get you more into that a little bit later. Just understand that basically if you're betting below the odds of 6 on this roll of a die, you're going to be having negative EV. That means you're going to be losing on the long run, and if you're betting over 6, then you're going to have a positive EV, which means that you should be winning in the long run. You've just got to simply know betting at poor odds can only equal one thing, and that is losses, whereas betting at positive EV is going to be on the long run, you can't possibly lose, and you're going to be a winner. So just take that into consideration, because the one rule is you've got to simply beat the odds. Nothing else counts. Beat the odds and you will win. Yeah, before I get back into it, I just want to mention that you can use software to sort of help you get ahead. There's loads of them out there. I mean, we recommend Rebel Betting, but that again is not really the theme here. I'm just mentioning this because software, they do all the scanning for you. They tell you where you can find the advantageous odds. They tell which bookmakers, which sports books, and so that is a simple way to get into this, but you still can need to understand the odds, so let's get back into it. Right, let's just cover the 3 different types of odds. There is a few more, but the basics of them are US odds, fractions and decimals. If we cover US odds first, everything is based on 100 at positive odds, which means you're going to win more than you actually stake, right? It's going to be what they call a plus. You know, you bet 100 and it's going to show you what you win and get you 100 back on top. At negative odds, they're going to show you what you're going to have to bet to win 100, and then of course you stake back on top of that, right? And you add the stake and the total together to get your return. With fractions, it's more often used in horse racing. I've even seen it on the US tracks. It's typically British, I'm afraid. The first number is the win and the second number the stake. So imagine you saw odds of like 7 to 4. You know that you'd be winning 7 for a stake of 4, which would be 11 back. The fun begins when the betting gets more complex, you know, like odds of 13 to 8, you've got 50 quid on it, or even like 35 quid on the 13 to 8. Right, so, you know, when it's divisible, it's easy, and when it's non-divisible, it gets more difficult. And now our favourite method is decimal odds, and I would encourage, even if you're in the States, even if you're in the UK, you should focus on this. I think the rest of the world pretty much does so it's not a big issue, but it's easy and logical to understand. The stake is simply, you know, to find out where you're going to get paid out. It's the stake times the decimal odds equals the payout. With parlay betting, you just get the odds times by the other odds times by the other odds times your stake, and you know the payout if that comes in. Also, you can convert odds to probability pretty quickly, and yeah, that's what we're going to cover in a second. But first things first, let's just have a look at some simple odds, right? So FAR is fractions, USA decimal. Odds of 1 to 2 fraction is minus 200, or 1.5 decimal, and the 3 to 1 you can see on the right is plus 300 in the US, and odds of 4 in decimal. But the complexities begin, you know, at odds of 11 to 8, because you place in the States, you'd have to you'd get a plus 138 in the UK. It would be the 11 to 8, you know, the fraction, and it would be 2.38 for the decimal odds, right? So, you know, you can start to see why decimal odds are easier to understand. And also in this instance, you can see the decimal odds there are 3.6, the fraction is 13 to 5. If you did this 100 divided by your 3.6, you'd have the odds 27.8% probability. If we look at this chart, you can see you've got fractions, USA odds and decimal odds, and then you've got the percent on the end. But the 1 to 4 is minus 400 in the USA and 1.25 decimal. So if your terms right, you do 100 divided by the 1.25 and you'd have the probability of 80%. If you did it with the 4 to 6, where it's 1.667, it's exactly the same. 100 divided by 1.667, 60%. We can see with the 2.75, 100 divided by 2.75, that's how you get your percent and you start putting them together, right? So that is pretty logical. If we move on to a football game, just give you an example, right? So we saw odds of like a typical bookmaker, odds of 2, 3.5, 3.5. You know that 100 divided by 2 is 50%, 100 divided by 3.5 is 28.57%. Add those together, you've got 107.14%. The bookmakers have got what they call an overround of 7.14%. We want to move you up. Now, obviously, this is going to take a little bit more understanding, but you're going to get more for your book if you do this. Now, in this instance, we're going to use the Chelsea against Manchester City game, and we're going to use a Bet365 odds. As you can see, I've got it written down at the bottom. The odds are 1.83 for Manchester City to win that match. If we go to the Asian handicap, you can see that minus 0.5, Manchester City are 1.87. What does that tell you? It's exactly the same bet. You can get 187 by taking the minus 0.5 with the same company, or you can be dumb and take the 1.83. Why would you take the 1.83 when you can get 1.87 if that's your only account? We can go to the next stage. We can say we want to bet Chelsea with the draw included. So that would be what the Europeans call a double chance. And in this instance, as you can see, the big dirty arrow there points to odds of 1.91. We could also do it with the European handicap, which is 3 options, right? It would be exactly the same. Look, odds of 1.91. So we've got Chelsea win and we've got the draw. Or we could be clever and go to the Asian handicap and bet Chelsea plus 0.5 and get odds of 203. We have just taken our odds from 1.91 to 203 with the same company. It means we're getting paid 12 cents more. You imagine you bet 100 quid, you get 191 back if it comes, or 203 back, right? If you was getting 50% of your bets right, you'd be losing 4.5% to 191. You'd be winning 1.5% to 203. And we're going to do something about these odds a little bit later. Just want to mention that, you know, in tennis there's also logical bets. Just for example here, Paolini to win 2-0. I've used 2 different bookmakers here because of the comparison on the other side. But you can see Benedome 2.30, 226 Vulcan bet on it, landing 2-0. Or we can just go and take minus 1.5 sets. It's exactly the same bet, but look, the odds increased 2.40 from 2.30. With better tone, and instead of getting the 226, we're getting 242 with the Vulcan bet, about exactly the same bet. So, you know, and this happens in all other sports, all other methods. So just try to think it through, because you've got to try to get as much out of the game as possible. And this is simple. Every one of you can do it, right? It's just a question of getting into a system. You don't need to understand much about odds to understand about value. If we just now move up another level, and we're going to take an NFL game into consideration for this, and what we're going to show you in this instance is that in this these 2 games, this is the first games of the season, they've already been priced up. These are average odds from Odds Portal. 155 on the home team on both the Chargers and the Dolphins, and you can see the Jags and the Raiders, it's averaging out at 2.50. So you can see exactly the same odds. Now what we're the theory here is that we're going to look at the handicap odds for them to cover 3.5 points eventually. But first, what we need to have a look at is the actual sort of points line. And in this instance, as you can see, you know, the sort of levelist betting point, you know, the sort of 190 would be somewhere between 48 and half and 49. So we're going to call it 48.75. You know, you have to forgive me if it's not exactly, rounded down, but you can see that number. And we'll do the same on the other game, and it's 43.25 as far as the Chargers goes. So you can see it's less points expected in that game. So how is that going to affect the actual handicap line? Well, it's quite simple. because the Chargers have got to, there's less points expected in that game, it's going to be more difficult for them to cover the 3.5 points. So you can see minus 3.5, you're getting 196, whereas because there's more points expected in the other game, it's only 1.93. So you saw the same basis odds starting, but you've got to take into comparison you've got to take into consideration, should I say, the actual the expected points, right? And that's the same also for football betting, for basketball, for everything. You've got to look at both those to sort of get a fix on where the handicap line should be. So that's something that you need to sort of take into consideration if you want to think a little bit deeper and so on. I've just wrote it there for you if you want to sort of freeze it on here. But basically more chance of covering when the XP, the expected points, is higher. I just want to quickly mention that if you are betting stuff like NFL, right, look for the 3s and 7s and go for the middle if you can find odds on both sides, and just hope that it comes, you'll find it advantageous. So that's just a sidetrack. Let's move it up to the next level. So like I promised, we are getting a little bit more sort of advanced. And going back to that Chelsea game earlier, if you remember, we had the double chance at 1.91, we had the European handicap at 1.91, and then I showed you how you could get up to 2.03 with the same bookmaker, about the same odds. Now, one thing I didn't mention that time is that the best odds available on the Asian handicap was 207. But if we can bet proportionally with Bet365 at 4.10 the home team Chelsea to win, and the draw at 4.31, we can create even better odds, because the 4.31 is 23.2% and the 4.1 is 24.39%, so it's 47.59%, which comes out, if you take the 100 divided by that, is 2.10. So you can see we've increased the odds again. We've took it up from a top odds of Asian handicap of 207 to 2.10. So I also want to just quickly cover a draw no bet scenario, because a draw no bet is typically used in European books, but it is also, there's plus minus 0 with an Asian handicap. So imagine that we could find the best odds in Asia was 197 the home team in this draw no bet and 198 the away. But we could see on the 1x2 market, we could find odds with the bookmakers that we've got at 2.65 the home team, 3.5 the draw and 2.8 the away. Now, if we did 28.57 at 3.50, we would be buying our 100 stake back, which is the draw no bet. So we've got our stake back. And then what we'd do with the remainder, the 71.43, we'd put it on the odds of 2.8 and we'd have 200 return, which means we're getting odds of 2. So you can see we've increased the away odds from 1.980 to 2. Just by being a little bit sort of wiser, being on the ball and understanding the game a little bit more. Right, so we want to go even higher. We want to make it a little bit more difficult for you and see if you can hang in there. And we're going to talk about the Asian handicap quarter ball. Now, I can go through these, but I won't bore you with them. I mean, if you understand into this stage, then of course you're going to understand what a minus 0.25 is as far as an Asian handicap goes. But basically, you've got half your stake on the win and half your stake on the draw no bet. With the plus 0.5 is the opposite, you've got half the stake on the plus 0.5, which is the double chance, and you've got half your stake on the draw no bet, right? So basically, if it's drawn with minus 0.5, you're only going to get 50 back, so 50 of your 100 stakes, whereas if it's drawn on the other side, you're going to get 150 back, right? Of course, if it wins in both cases, it's just going to be simply the 200 back, right? And of course, if the other team wins, the bet is lost in any case, right? It's also the same with minus 0.75. You've just got to think that half your stake is on the 0.5, the actual winning of the game, and the other half the stake is on minus 1 goal. So, for the whole bet to win, your team would have to win by 2 or more goals, right? If it won just by 1 goal, you'd still be in profit because you'd won half of that bet and the other half of bet would have been void, right? So 150 back, right? And the opposite is true of the plus 0.75. I just wanted to sort of mention that to you because I think it is something that a lot of people don't think about, and if you really want to get into the sort of maths of it, it's something that could help you out, right? If we do an imaginary scenario again, just for sort of last roll of the dice, right? So let's say the Asian handicap odds minus 0.25 on the home team, right? And you see the odds 1.95. but we can find odds on the 1x2 of 2.30, 3.5, 3.2. In this instance, what we could do, we could put 14.29 on the draw to buy our 50 back, which is that half the stake back if it does land on the draw, what we mentioned earlier. So that would then leave us 85.71, and we could place that at the odds of 2.30. And in this instance, we'd get 197.13 back for our 100 stake. So now we've got odds of 1.97 or thereabouts, right? So you can see, the best odds on the home is 1.95, but we've just created odds of 1.97 by just being a little bit cleverer and being a little bit more sort of awake. This is how professionals work. We're always trying to get those extra couple of pips because it's massive to our bottom and bottom line, the end line, right? There's a chart for you if you want to do the Asian handicaps for yourself, and so that's about the basis of it. If you made it to this stage of the video, could you be so kind and drop us a comment? I would just like to see how much you understood, so give me some idea. In the next video, we're going to do a bit of sports modelling, cover goals, home advantage, points and so on, right? So, if you like this type of thing, make sure that you subscribe to the channel. You're through to boot camp for now. I'm Tony from Bet Analyst. See you in the next one soon. Bye-bye.